Hey and welcome everyone. Today is episode 3 of the AKS Zero to Hero series. Today we're going to talk about what is AKS.
Cool. Looking forward to it. Good to start off with the basics. So let's continue on. So let's crack on. I believe you've got slides again.
Yep, as always. So
Cool.
let's get those up. So obviously, what is AKS? It's the biggest question that we sort of need to answer on the course about AKS. So AKS is a Microsoft's version of Kubernetes. So they've tweaked it quite a bit to make it work better in their cloud, added some new bits in, everything like that. It's a free, fully managed service in Azure. So you actually get the control plane for free. You don't get the nodes or anything else, but the control plane is free, which is the best bit of Kubernetes because you don't have to look after it if it's up in the cloud. It's also open source and you can find it on GitHub. They do a lot of stuff out in the open, so you can actually see issues, you can see roadmaps and everything like that up in GitHub, which is awesome. It was created in June of 2018, so it's not as old as Kubernetes is, but it's it's stable now. It's a mature product in Azure. And obviously being Azure Kubernetes Services, it's extremely highly integrated with Azure. So you get the joys of using Azure Active Directory and Azure Monitor easily out of the box using AKS add-ons, which we'll go through later in a different video series.
Cool. I didn't actually know it was open source.
No, it is. It's crazy, isn't it? Like Microsoft are open sourcing it. I guess because Kubernetes is open source, they have to make it open source.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's little bits of it that aren't quite open source. The bits that are their integrations with Azure and bits they can't tell you, but it is technically open source. Yeah. So some benefits of AKS, obviously, it gives you less headaches, which is always a win. So basically, all I'm trying to say there is because if you're setting up Kubernetes yourself, you have to set up the control plane and everything like that. And it's an absolute nightmare. Microsoft does that all for you. You literally click a few buttons or type a few commands and you've got a Kubernetes cluster created rather than spending hours or days if you're new to it setting up a cluster which might be different to someone else's and everything. At least with this way, it's always the control planes are always set up the same way. By doing that, you actually can get faster application development. So it is a benefit because it means your developers can spend less time looking after Kubernetes, setting up Kubernetes, and more time focusing on their applications, creating new features and bug fixes. Doesn't mean that there isn't work to do, because there is, but that's usually handled by an operations team rather than a development team or outsourced to a company like Intercept. The next one is security and compliance. So because it's up in Azure, you can actually easily integrate it with Azure AD, as I mentioned. Kubernetes role-based access control can be done through Azure now as well. I think it's still in preview, but that's going to come out of preview very soon. It can actually integrate with Azure Defender, which is Azure Security Center. It's just a paid-for version. So you can be alerted if there's issues inside your cluster or if there's vulnerabilities that Microsoft are aware of. They can let you know, because they have a lot of clusters on their system, so they can actually utilize all of that and see the patterns, use a bit of machine learning to find out, oh, this cluster is doing something strange, and that one over there is also doing the same kind of thing. So it will see all these trends and then actually help you out. It's also one of the most compliant Kubernetes systems in the world. It's got SOC, HIPAA, ISO, PCI, DSS. It's compliant with all of those, so that's really awesome. If you set one up yourself, it's hard to do that, so another awesome thing. As I mentioned, it's super easily integrated to Azure systems, not just Azure systems, but because it's Kubernetes, you can still use all of the extensions you can get from Kubernetes. So like Helm, Knative, Kada, anything that you can run on normal Kubernetes can pretty much run on this. So that's good. And obviously the biggest benefit is Brendan Burns, who is the co-founder of Kubernetes, actually works for Microsoft. So that's a lot of power behind the product, pushing it how he envisioned it and how the community sees it. It's a good sort of, it's really good. Any questions on that slide?
Yeah, I've got just one popped into my head. So if a new version of AKS comes out, I guess we'll cover this in a later video, but is it easy to upgrade from version 2 to version 3, for example? Like go up a version?
Yeah, definitely. So you can easily do it for a few clicks in the portal, or you can do it through command line. It's super easy. Microsoft are one of the best cloud providers who support the newest versions before others. So like there's a version, say 1.19.6 or and that will be out in Microsoft, but won't be out in the other clouds just yet. They're always one of the first to get there. They give you the previews as well. So in your dev clusters or your preview clusters, you can actually test your application on the newest version of Kubernetes before it's actually officially supported by Microsoft. So like version 1.20, you can actually test it before you move your applications to it. So you don't actually have to do an update and hope for the best. So
Okay,
that's really cool.
One other question has just popped in. Is there any downtime when you're upgrading?
That all depends on how you've built your application. So if you've built your application to be resilient and use multiple replicas of the same pod, then it should be fine. If you haven't, then it won't. So the best thing to do is create another node pool, which we'll go through later. Move your application onto that. It will still have downtime because you're moving an application, and then update that pod, the node pool. But we'll go through all of that in different update scenarios later.
All good.
So another thing we should mention is costs. So as I've mentioned, the control plane is actually free. In AKS, you actually only have to pay for the resources you use. So that's like virtual machines, storage, networking, egress, the standard Azure things. They do have the Azure pricing calculator now, so you can actually get most of the costs. It's still only an estimate because you can't figure out how much your egress, your network traffic is going to be without actually running your application. So, it's a good starting point. You always have to have in production at least 2, preferably 3 Linux nodes running to get Kubernetes to actually work. So they class it as a free service, but you actually have to pay for these 3 nodes, 2 nodes, 3 nodes. So is it really a free service? I'm not 100% sold on that myself, but that's the official line. And then recently they've released this optional uptime SLA, which is a paid for service. So because they class Kubernetes AKS as free, they don't actually give you a guaranteed availability. They only strive to get 99.5% uptime to the Kubernetes API server. So that's the master control plane. But if you pay for the uptime SLA, you can get 99.95% if your cluster uses Azure availability zones, which we'll go through in another session again. Without availability zones, you only get 99.9%. So it's a bit better than the free version, but really you should only ever use this if you have a requirement, like a security requirement or a financial requirement sort of thing. You just check in some boxes. The free one, I've never had an issue with it, to be fair. So yeah. One thing to note with the optional uptime SLA is once you've upgraded to it, you can't actually downgrade to the free version. You have to rebuild the cluster. So make sure you actually are 100% you want it before you do it.
What's the sort of cost for the uptime SLA?
So that all depends on region. It's around about 90 euros roughly, but obviously it can change. It all depends how many nodes you have and everything like that. Yeah. So I think now I'm going to do a quick picture of what Kubernetes AKS clusters look like in the Azure portal. So, it's just a nice, simple portal. Looks like everything else. And, we'll be going deeper into this later, but I thought we'll give you a sneak peek now to get, whet your appetite to see what we're going to be looking at. And the last slide is if you've got any questions or feedback. It's cool. So, have you got any questions, Gregor, or do you want me to go deeper into anything?
I think I've covered the questions. Yeah.
It's awesome. So yeah, it's just a quick one today about what is AKS. Next session, I think we're going to go a bit deeper into actually we might actually create our first AKS cluster using the Azure portal, and then we can actually go through some things with that, which should be really good.
I think we'll also cover what tools we're going to use.
Yeah, definitely. So like kubectl, as we've mentioned previously, we'll go through that as well. So yeah, should be good.
Yeah, looking forward to it. So please join us for the next session, which will be coming soon.
Cool. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell to be alerted for our next video.
See you in episode 4. Bye for now.
Bye.